Hello! This is Hooked by Happenstance. I'm Kendra, and it is time for chapter 41 of Yarn Tales. Yarn Tales is my ongoing series where I read books, I tell you a bit about them, and then I apply silly Kendra rules to my star rating for the book, and I add a chapter to my Yarn Tales shawl. Now this video has been a long time coming because I did not enjoy this book. And whereas when I read lots of good books in a row, it sometimes stalls out my reading because then I'm worried that a bad book is coming. When I read a bad book, it stalls out my videos because it means I have to talk about a book I didn't like. Now, I will preface this by saying that this was not a bad book as far as like content-wise. There was nothing like appalling about it. I simply did not enjoy it at all. I simply did not enjoy this book at all, and I am not the only member of my family who felt that way. So, the book that we're going to talk about today, I actually have in physical form. Isn't that terrible? The book I actually own is a book I didn't like. We read The School for Good and Evil by Soman Chanani. This is book 1 of the series, and apparently there's many books. The reason that I bought this book, because I bought it myself, so we were at Walmart, and we were perusing the book aisle, and we happened to pick up a novelization of the Lego Movie because we love the Lego Movie and the Lego Movie 2. And so I got in a book for some of my kids, and I saw this book that was marked down to like $4 by the publisher. That should have been my first indicator, because you know what they don't mark down? They don't mark down really good, really popular books that sell without having their prices marked down. So, the price was very, very inexpensive, so we picked it up, and my daughter and I decided we were going to buddy read. So we were going to pass this book back and forth, read chapters. My hubandstance got in on the mix, and he was reading it via ebook, and that was all going to be well and good. Well, this book is the story of Sophie and Agatha, who are childhood friends in their village, I guess. And then the book does a really hard sell at the very beginning of making you think one of them's going to be good and one of them's going to be evil. And they get whisked off by a series of unfortunate events, both of them, to a school for good and evil, and they split the kids up. Well, things don't turn out like you'd expect based on the hard sell of who's who, and the book focuses on trying to tell you that maybe they should be switched. Or maybe they shouldn't. And it just, I didn't care. None of the characters were likable. There was nothing about this book that made me want to keep going. I didn't like any of the characters, and not in like a unlikable characters, you know, can have this growth arc. It just felt like it was so heavy-handed in pushing this idea that it didn't give you any sort of credit as a reader that you could like figure out that maybe the good person is really a bad person or why. And they were just so mean to each other, and it just bothered me. So I gave up, I think, at about 25%. I originally was reading this book, and it was just 28% is where I stopped. Because I was reading the paper book back and forth with my daughter. We had a very ambitious plan of how quick we were going to get through this book. But it became apparent after our, like, second day of reading that neither of us could keep up with that pace because we found the book so boring that we just couldn't like tear through it, and it was actually making us sleepy, which I guess made it useful in some way, just not the way we were hoping. So she continued to read the paper version, and I had switched to the ebook because I've proven of late that I can read ebooks faster and stay on track with them better. So I was reading the ebook, but even that, it was a struggle. It was a slog. So I was like trying to get done with it because I, had made this commitment to read it as a buddy read. But then the three of us were kind of having a little like book discussion, and none of us were enjoying it. And so then privately, Steve and I were talking about the book, and we both decided that we didn't want to finish it and we wanted to DNF it. So we presented that as an option to our daughter. And it was also a good discussion about like how it is good to stick with things that you make commitments to as far as books and stuff. But if a book is just providing zero value, there is no reason to continue reading it, especially when as a group we could come to that decision together. And so when we asked her, would you mind if we quit reading it? She was like, oh no, that's fine. And she thought she was going to finish it because she was closer to the end than either of us was, but she didn't finish it either. We all decided to DNF it. So that is where we stand on this book. I know there's lots of people that like the series. Obviously, it's a bestseller. There's many books in it. We will not be continuing on in the series because it was just boring and yeah. So that is where that stands, but it did make for a nice ending to my shawl. So my reading shawl began as 1 shawl. It has turned into 3. We're rapidly moving into 4. And this is the final chapter of shawl number 3, which is my green shawl. And here it is. This being the final chapter also meant this was like super finagling on yarn to make everything work. I had changed some of my rules to what counted as what because I was rapidly running out of yarn and I had read in different categories and ways than I had anticipated. So I had originally started with 4 yarns with 4 topic areas. Books that I read by myself that were audiobooks, books that I read by myself that were physical books, Life's Library subscription books, so I get a new one every 6 weeks, and books I read with my kids. Well, I took away the Life's Library one and I just did physical and audiobooks by myself. And I count this as by myself even though it was a buddy read because I was consuming it by myself, like in parallel to my kid. And not all my kids, just the one. So, this is the final chapter. I used Lolo Did It in the color Bourbon. This is on the Simple DK and it's got dog fur on it because, well, my animals love me. And it actually turned out that having a DNF'd book at the very edge of the shawl is kind of a nice little, like closer. So while I did use the Bourbon color, I used the stitch pattern that I had been using for physical books by myself. And it made this nice kind of like, I don't know, bobbly looking border. And then with DNF'd books, what I do is I do the patterned row for the book, the chapter. And then I just do this 1 row of single crochet, same as you would get for a 1-star book, but I really haven't read very many 1-star books. They usually are more valuable than that or I don't finish them. So this single row of single crochet is just a nice little capper to the whole thing. And I really like how it just kind of ended. I feel like the ending in the Bourbon color kind of grounded the whole thing. So it did make for a nice finish to a very enjoyable shawl's worth of reading. This particular book just wasn't very enjoyable. And I worked on it for a large portion of this reading. Like, I feel like I was back up here when I started the book, and I was here when I finally just decided that no, it was something I needed to give up on. So, that is my feelings on the School for Good and Evil. Now I will getting on weaving in ends and blocking this thing, and there will be a video coming out here, the next one probably, that will be a reveal of shawl number 3 in all of its glory so that you can see it, as well as some recapping of some stats. Since this chapter did not get me to the end of April, I actually have more books I read in April. April constituted more than a shawl's worth of reading. Isn't that crazy? So April's reading goes on into the next shawl, so we will talk stats on the whole month then, but there will be a recap of some other things that I have been combining stats about my reading so far this year. So keep your eye out for that reveal video. If you want to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe down below because I do not post on a regulated schedule, though I do post regularly. So if you would like the videos just pop into your feed when they come out, that is the best way to do it. And if you've missed out on any of the chapters of this shawl or any of the others, there is a playlist here on the channel so you can catch up if you are interested. Alrighty, hope you all are having a great whenever you see this, and I will see you all next time. Bye!